What is going on, YouTube Nation and fantasy football fans everywhere? It is 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Wednesday, September 20th on the East Coast, and we are live. Spiky Dash, a.k.a. Chris Pearson, here with you for the Week 3 preview edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your team, your league, your game, your home. You know where to go to find the latest and greatest fantasy football information to help you win your week upcoming. The big story coming out of week 2, my gosh, and I think this was the same case last year if I recall correctly, the injury bug hit hard again. So many players. Now, some of these we already knew they were going to be out for a long period of time anyway, but a lot of them happened last week. And, I mean, at this point, I think the question really to ask is, who out there still has a healthy roster? Anybody? If you're a GM and you still have a pretty healthy fantasy football roster, good on you, because you are very fortunate to be one of those people, because it was a shock, I think, if you didn't have at least one player, if not more, suffer some kind of injury this weekend. Some of these you're going to have out for the foreseeable future, including myself, losing Greg Olsen at tight end. And normally he's pretty reliable. Well, he's now going to be down 6 to 8 weeks with a broken foot. And even though at that point he might come back, that's still going to be a long time down the road, and you don't really know where your team's going to be at this point, and might be even close to the end of the season. So I had to make a decision there to make a move. I did. I got another tight end off waivers. And so some of these decisions you might have to make depending on the status of these players. So very tricky. But the matchups this week, I mean, there's some that are great. There's some not so much. At least from one side, they're going to be pretty good, because you got this week you got a lot of undefeated teams taking on 0-2 teams in the NFL. So, and you've also got a 9:30 morning game in London this week. So you got to keep that in mind before you set your lineups as well. So we're going to try to get you that victory no matter where you're at, whether you're sitting pretty at 2-0, right in the middle at 1-1, or even also kind of a sluggish 0-2 start. We want to get you a win this week. My team had another great week last week. Another big win for me and my co-owners, Nate and Matt. Another big win for us. We won big again. We had 98 points for the second straight week. So we are cruising right now, off to a 2-0 start, even though we just lost Olsen, who's the second player we've lost in as many weeks. We're still finding good players off the wire. We're still getting quality production out of our stud guys. So we are really, really doing really well. But the notable list of players that are injured, that whole paragraph, that's all notable injuries, okay? That's all guys that either we know are going to be out or we need to monitor throughout the week to see their status going forward. And, and again, here's, and we know about Andrew Luck. We know he's already been ruled out for week 3. Probably won't play week 4 either, and his status is really still unknown. But Jacoby Brissett's going to come in and be the starter in Indianapolis for the foreseeable future. Sam Bradford, what's his status going to be? He was a shocking inactive last week because of that bone bruise in his knee. So, and Case Keenum did not look very good running the Vikings offense. So what are we going to get? If Bradford, it'd be nice to see Bradford play this week, but if he doesn't, then obviously his receivers are going to get a bit of a downgrade. At the running back position, you got a couple notable names. Jordan Howard from Chicago suffered a shoulder injury. So now maybe Tarek Cohen gets an even bigger role this week. If you jump to the wire early and got Tarek Cohen, paying big dividends there. But now, how are we available this week? Well, we'll see what happens. DeMarco Murray in Tennessee, a nagging hamstring issue. That Derrick Henry had a big week last week. If Murray doesn't play, Derrick Henry could be serviceable right away. Rob Kelly in Washington suffered a rib injury. Now, they feared it was a fracture. Luckily for them, it wasn't. But there's still some uncertainty whether or not he's going to play or if he'll be limited this week. So Chris Thompson is a great play, even in a PPR league or not. I tried to get him off waivers. I got beat out for him. I really wanted him because, again, as I mentioned, I love the dual threat backs. So, he could be a potential here. Terrence West. As I mentioned, I'm a Terrence West owner. And he got thoroughly outsnapped by Buck Allen last week in Baltimore, something like 42-15. And now he's dealing with a soft tissue injury, and his status is day-to-day. So what's his role going to be? And is it going to be reduced with Allen there in the backfield? And Rex Burkhead in New England with a rib injury. So, is he going to be available? Wide receivers, though, wide receivers and tight ends took the biggest hit. Jordy Nelson, quad injury. Now, thankfully for Packers fans, he practiced today. So at least Jordy Nelson practiced, and signs right now are pointing to him playing. But Randall Cobb did not. He's got a shoulder issue, so his status is very much in doubt. Corey Davis in Tennessee, that nagging hamstring flared up again, and now potentially he could be out, and Rashard Matthews could step up and be a top option there. Again, I mentioned with Arizona with John Brown with the quad situation. If he doesn't get any more, if he's out again, J.J. Nelson becomes a great fantasy play. And we do know now that Corey Coleman for Cleveland is out an extended time with the same hand that he broke a couple of years ago, or at least last year, a couple of years ago. The same hand that he broke before happened again. So he's out again for an extended period of time. Kenny Britt hasn't been doing much. They signed Rashad Higgins off the practice squad, so now he could potentially come in and be a very great option for you. So a lot of question marks at wide receiver. And then tight ends, Rob Gronkowski suffered a groin injury, and he did not practice today, so monitor that leading up to this week. I mentioned Greg Olsen. Tyler Eifert, back injury. He's been an oft-injured problem over the past couple seasons. So now this is a new thing for Tyler Eifert. Jimmy Graham with an ankle in Seattle. Jordan Reed, a chest injury in Washington. Got to monitor his status. And then Jesse James in Pittsburgh with an ankle. Those signs are pointing to him actually going to be ready to play. But monitor that as well. So a lot to monitor. A couple guys that we're not going to have this week. But again, the matchups, a lot of these are favorable for a lot of teams, because of, a lot of them are 2-0 against 0-2 teams. Or I think there's only one battle of true unbeaten, and I believe that's Lions and Falcons, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of opportunities here, to get good players, to have good matchups to exploit. So there's a lot to break down here, a lot to dissect, and we're going to jump right into it. Starting with tomorrow night's game on Thursday night. Rams and 49ers. This one, it might be another ugly one. Well, maybe from a 49er perspective. The 49er offense is not very good. I mean, I don't think they've scored a touchdown in the first two games, kind of like the Bengals. They haven't scored a touchdown in the first two games. I don't think the 49ers have yet either. So outside of a couple players, outside of Carlos Hyde, who we know is a rock-solid force in the backfield, and Pierre Garçon, who's going to get targets as number one receiver, you really can't trust any other 49ers in this game. And we know the Rams defense is strong now under Wade Phillips' tutelage. I picked up, again, off waivers this week as well to get a stronger DST. I normally have the Chiefs, but I haven't found a matchup yet that I really like starting the Chiefs DST in, because I find better options on the waiver wire. So I've used the Rams in week 1, got me 34 points. I used the Raiders last week, got me 16, although the Chiefs, I think, had the same amount. So, really, and now the Rams have got another great match this week going against the 49ers, who really don't have much of an offense. So, I really feel like this is going to be another big game for the Rams defense. And I like a lot of the Rams in this game for those obvious reasons. So, again, the obvious for the 49ers is just the first two, Carlos Hyde, Pierre Garçon. That's really the only two 49ers you can really use in this game because of the tough matchup that Ravens defense, or the Rams defense present. I screwed up again. The Rams defense presents. Ravens come later. So for the Rams, Todd Gurley. I mean, Todd Gurley has been an absolute stud rock force at running back, at least in these first couple games of the season. He's going to have a big week. I think you roll with him. Cooper Kupp right now is probably the better, safer wide receiver option, but I don't want to give up entirely on Sammy Watkins yet. Yes, he's been a disappointment in the first couple games of the season, but the Rams brought him there to really boost their receiving core. And I don't think they're just going to kind of leave him out to dry. Yes, Jared Goff has developed a rapport with Cooper Kupp, and it's a nice one, but I don't think they're going to give up entirely on Sammy Watkins. So I think you can still play him and get good production out of him. But Cooper Kupp is definitely a must-play at this point, even also in PPR leagues, because he gets a lot of targets from Jared Goff. And like I mentioned, the Rams defense, I'm playing them in fantasy this week. I love this matchup. I want to get an early jump on Thursday night, so I'm on my opponent this week because I want to get off to that 3-0 start. So I'm playing him this week. Because while the Chiefs matchup against the Chargers is okay, I'm weary of the weapons that Phillip Rivers has at his disposal and the fact that he's playing at home. So that kind of worries me a little bit. So that's why I prefer the Rams, at least from my perspective, in this matchup. But I'm going to say if you're in a pinch or you play in a 2-quarterback league, Jared Goff, again, might not be a bad play this week. I mean, once again, strong value considering he's facing – again, one of the worst teams right now in the league. And get this, one of 9 0-2 teams in the NFL right now. There's actually, if you compare 2-0 teams to 0-2 teams, there's actually more 0-2 teams than there are 2-0. There's 9 winless teams compared to 8 undefeated teams. But it's 10 if you or 2-0 teams, I should say. But it's 10 if you include Miami and Tampa Bay, who played their first game last week. So really, if you've got a good matchup like this to exploit, you need to take advantage of it. And remember what he did against the Colts. So Jared Goff has some nice value this week. I think at least strong QB2 value, but the upside is definitely there considering this plus matchup. And really the only sit that's really worth noting is if anyone wants to get cute and play Brian Hoyer, don't. I mean, like I said, the 49ers offense outside of hiding Garcon is not great. So, and the Rams defense is clearly a much better unit under Wade Phillips. This game can get ugly very, very fast. Remember in week 1, Carolina beat San Francisco 23-3. This game could probably take on that tune really quickly if Goff and the offense gets going. So that could take that tune very, very quickly. So now we go into the Sunday games. And remember, we have an early one this week. So again, you want to get your lineup set early. You want to make sure that you're pretty much rock solid by maybe Saturday night because or after the Thursday game plays, then you want to really lock in for Sunday because we have this 9:30 game in London with the Ravens and the Jaguars. And the Jaguars apparently kind of treat London like a second home. Like apparently they really like playing in London. And certainly the fan base comes out. I mean, London has really pulled some big crowds there at Wembley Stadium, and they get the massive crowds because the fan base is really, really strong. But, the Jaguars, I think have played there probably the most of any team. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% certain. But I think probably they've played there. I think they've played there a lot. So they kind of treat it like a second home. But they're playing a Baltimore team that, while they are 2-0, hasn't actually been, overtly exciting. Joe Flacco is playing as well as he can. The defense is winning them a lot of games. Baltimore's defense really is kind of the caveat in this game because Jacksonville looked really, really good in week 1, beating up on Houston, and then looked really, really bad last week against Tennessee. Kind of looked like Jacksonville again. Looked really, really bad. So it's clear that, in order for Jacksonville to really be in a game, their offense has to be on it. But when you lose Allen Robinson and when the defense isn't on its game, it can be kind of tricky. Leonard Fournette cannot win games by himself. I think that's pretty clear that, while Leonard Fournette, yes, is a stud for Jacksonville and he does great things, he's not going to win them games by himself. So clearly this offense has to get going. But against this Ravens defense has been very, very strong and has weapons there as well. I think it's going to be very, very tricky. But here's another caveat, though. The Jaguars tend to play well in London. I'm not sure what it is, but they tend to kind of show up a little bit better when they play in London. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic as well. So I'm very intrigued by this matchup. And that's why I like a lot of players in this game. For the Ravens, Buck Allen. Buck Allen has emerged as the clear running back to own now in Baltimore. We thought Terrence West was going to be the guy, and maybe the injury had something to do with it, but he got out-touched last week, as I mentioned in the intro. He got out-touched like something to the tune of like 42-15, something like that. But Buck Allen has clearly shown that he's doing more with the work he's getting. Now, granted, Terrence West has a nose for the end zone at the goal line. And if he plays, he might still be involved at the goal line. But clearly, at this point, he's nothing more than a flex play. The back to own right now in Baltimore is Javorius Buck Allen. And he now is pretty much an obvious start going forward, at least as an RB2, if not higher, because he is now the workhorse back, it seems to be, in Baltimore. Jeremy Maclin, I'm not giving up on him yet either. I mean, look, again, he was brought there to enhance this passing game, and we know Joe Flacco likes to throw. So I don't see how at this point you really can give up on him. And again, the Jaguars secondary being exploitable as they are, I think you can take advantage of that. So I think Maclin could have a big week. Ben Watson. Ben Watson is also a sneaky name to be aware of at tight end. If you're have one of those tight ends that you just like, say you just lost Olsen, or you're unsure about Gronk's status or Eifert or what have you, or Reed, go get Ben Watson. He caught all of his targets last week, and we know how much Joe Flacco likes tight ends. I mean, now granted he's had an injury problem at tight ends over the years, losing Dennis Pitta and Crockett Gilmore. But clearly Joe Flacco knows how to utilize his tight ends. So I think Ben Watson is considerably an obvious start moving forward at this point because he's so utilized in this offense. And I mentioned again the Ravens defense. You got to play him in this matchup considering the Jags, if they're off, if Blake Bortles is like Blake Bortles and he has a bad game, then you got to take advantage of that. And certainly I think the Ravens defense could do that in this game. For the Jags, though, Leonard Fournette obviously is a must start. And again, I like the two receivers. I think you got to play Allen Hurns and Marquise Lee. They're really the two best options that the Jaguars have now that Allen Robinson has done it for the year. You got to play Allen Hurns as a strong wide receiver 1 or 2. And Marquise Lee is at least a solid wide receiver 3 in standard leagues, but an even better option in PPR leagues as well. But I'm going to say Joe Flacco is, again, I'd say, a pretty decent start in this game. The Ravens running backs outside of Buck Allen are banged up, they're with Terrence West's uncertainty. So I have a feeling Flacco's going to be airing it out a lot in this game. I don't think they're going to lean on Allen too much. I don't think he's going to see 42 carries again. I really don't think that flow is going to be, especially if the Ravens get up big in this game. So I think Flacco could have a pretty good week. I like him as a high-end QB2, but certainly the QB1 upside is there, especially in a plus matchup. And come on, it's still the Jags. And clearly what we saw last week, I mean, they're still pretty bad. So it hasn't changed a lot. The sits, Blake Bortles, no. I mean, against Houston, yeah, that was encouraging, but that was a byproduct of the Texans' offense not being very functional. And really, even with Deshaun Watson, they're still not very functional right now. They barely beat Cincinnati last week. So, this is a much tougher animal, tough, kind of like Tennessee. Yes, like I said, the Jags love playing in London, but I wouldn't want to trust them, even though with garbage time numbers, I don't think he's going to have a whole lot this week. Very, very risky, a low-end QB2 play, only if you are very, very desperate or a two-quarterback league. Very, very risky, though. And like I said, Terrence West, dealing with that soft tissue injury, is listed as day-to-day. But as Keith Oldman said, we're all day-to-day. But it's looking really more like he's not going to go. Monitor the report, see what happens to Terrence West. But even if he plays, soft tissue injuries for running backs are hard to recover from, and they very much limit your ability. So even if he plays, I think West will be very, very limited. So I would not trust him unless, again, as a desperate flex. I really don't think you can play him full-time anymore at this point. It was fun while it lasted. He had 2 great games, 14 points and 10 points in a CBS league, but I don't think he's going to get the work clearly anymore unless he steals Vulture's touchdowns from Allen. So, game of the WEAK. No, it's not Rams 49ers, shocking as that is. No. The game of the week, WEAK, is the battle of 0-2 teams. The Browns and the tanking Indianapolis Colts. I mean, I saw an article, true story. I saw an article today on Twitter that the price, no joke, the cheapest ticket on StubHub for this game in Indianapolis is $18, okay? That is cheaper than all the parking passes you can get for any game this weekend except for one. Cowboys and Cardinals. That's it. That is absolutely insane. That is how bad it has gotten for the Colts. And and it is just awful. And now the Browns just lose their top wide receiver weapon in Corey Coleman. At least it seemed that way. He was going to be the breaking guy because Kenny Britt hasn't done very much. And now he's out with a broken hand again. So, and the Browns are favored in this game. They're favored by a touchdown. That tells you all you need to know, folks. That tells you how bad it has gotten for the Colts. And again, plug, but full epic rant coming tomorrow night on ATSD, episode 9, 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Right here, again. But I know I was going to do it Monday, but then I got busy. But this game is not going to be entertaining by any stretch. This game is not going to be fun. It's, people have said, oh, well, the offense looks so much better than Jacoby Brissett. Well, yeah, but that really doesn't matter for much. I mean, he's slightly better than Tolzien, but he's not Andrew Luck, and that's really what matters. And gosh, did you see Pagano's press conference today? I know I'm deviating here, but it kind of ties in. Did you see Chuck Pagano's press conference today when a media member asked him about when Andrew Luck's going to be back and stuff, and he's like, well, you and I both know the same thing. As God is my witness. Just say nobody knows and move on. I've said this for weeks. Just say nobody knows. Next question. How about Cleveland? Let's talk about Cleveland. We're moving on to Cleveland. What about Cleveland? How about the Browns? Let's talk about the Browns. What about Cleveland? How are you preparing for Cleveland? How do you expect to beat Cleveland? Why is a parking pass $18? Why is the ticket $18 cheaper than a parking pass? You can ask anything, but no more question about Andrew Luck, please. When he shows up, he shows up, okay? But it's like, in the meantime, let's not talk about it because honestly, nobody knows, and I'm tired of hearing about it. There really aren't a whole lot of obvious starts here. For the Browns, Isaiah Crowell, you start him. I mean, he's a set and forget it. He's their rock horse. Rock horse. Oh, my gosh. Here I go again. Workhorse. Where the poop does rock horse come from? Rock horse. Oh my gosh, man. First Stott, then Shart, and now Rock Horse. Sure. Rock Horse. Although speaking of Rock Horse, that's probably what tying in ATSD a little bit, that's probably what Rarity looked like in episode 19. Rock Horse. Okay. Isaiah Crowell is the rock horse, or more simply the workhorse back in Cleveland's backfield. You can get reliable production out of him. He's an obvious start. And I'm going to say, at least for this matchup, the Browns defense is a very sneaky play. And I think one you should play because remember, teams playing the Colts this year, at least the DSTs have had very good success. Remember the Rams week 1. So I think this is a very good play this week, and I think you can play him here. But really for the TTIC, Frank Gore is the only play. I mean, Frank Gore really is right now the only Colt that you can trust. That's an obvious play. I mean, the other options aren't so obvious normally. I mean, they would with Andrew Luck under center, but not with Jacoby Brissett. Frank Gore, at least leads the backfield. Marlon Mack is not that big a threat to him. So for now, Frank Gore is obvious. But I think you can start Deshaun Kaiser. Look, as long as, last week he also had a bit of a migraine issue. It flared up during the game. And Kevin Hogan came in briefly and took his place, filled in for him. But, as long as that's not an issue and he plays in this game, he's a great play against one of the worst teams in the league. And he may have lost Coleman, but remember, Jared Goff did great things against the Colts, and he kind of has a kind of middling, at least a bit better receiving core than Cleveland, but at least Cleveland has some talent there. So, to me, Kaiser definitely has QB2 upside and is, I think, a great play if you're playing a 2-quarterback league this week. And I know this next name might shock you. Duke Johnson. Yeah, like what? Remember when I said that Duke Johnson was fading from the Browns offense that had really little to no value at all? Well, like a phoenix, he has risen from the ashes and he is back. Duke Johnson is fantasy relevant again because mainly with the Browns receiving core getting thin, Johnson stepped up. He's taken on a receiver role. He's getting targets. And now I think he has at least RB3 value in standard leagues and a strong RB2 value in PPR leagues this week. So I think he can be serviceable again if you're in a pinch at running back or if you even need running back depth. I think potentially Duke Johnson can be very, very serviceable this week. He's starting to get the yardage, get the targets, and going to be more involved in this offense now that Corey Coleman is out for a long period of time. I did mention Kenny Britt at first because he kind of became the de facto number one wide receiver because of Coleman's broken hand. But they just signed, like I said, I think Higgins off the practice squad, and maybe now he's going to be the guy you want to own as a wide receiver 3 with 2 upside if you're in a pinch, because it looks like he's going to take over the main bulk of the targets because he broke out last week. So, maybe not so much for Kenny Britt, maybe more of a risky 3 or 4 until we see, if his target total is really going to increase in light of what happened to Corey Coleman. So, still risky, but at least now he has a little more value than he did because he really wasn't doing much even when Corey Coleman was healthy. So, still a risky play. And how about Jack Doyle? I mean, oh my gosh, somebody actually has developed a rapport with Jacoby Brissett and the Colts offense. Shocker, right? I mean, absolute shocker that, that Doyle's developed this rapport with Jacoby Brissett, like Ben Watson. He caught all his targets last week, didn't find the end zone, but still, went 7 for 7 or 8 of 8 with, and he's caught 10 of his 12 targets this season. Jack Doyle's becoming very reliable for the Colts, and apparently right now he's really the only reliable receiver, tight end of any kind that has value in this offense. If you're in a pinch at tight end, I think Doyle could be a very serviceable low-end tight end 1. I think he's, clearly got this rapport with Brissett, and I think he could be, very much valuable this week and even going forward if you lost a tight end this week. The sits are pretty obvious. I mean, you're not going to play Jacoby Brissett. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, is he better than Scott Tolzien? Yes, absolutely, but really not by much. But is he Andrew Luck? Hell no. So therefore, he has no fantasy value, and you, a smart fantasy player, do not take this risk. So don't play Jacoby Brissett. But again, you still cannot play T.Y. Hilton. And I'm surprised this week. I've seen a lot of projections out there with T.Y. Hilton, 9, 7, 8, 10. The Fantasy Sharks, I think, have T.Y. Hilton going for 10 fantasy points. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He hadn't even hit that mark. He hadn't even hit, I think, 5 fantasy points this season. He had 3 in week 1, and he had 4 in week 2. He has not even hit that mark at all this season. And I know the matchup is good, but he has not delivered with either Tolzien or Brissett at quarterback. Been an absolute major disappointment. I'm still keeping him stashed because I'm still holding out hope that Luck is going to come back. But, boy, you really cannot play T.Y. Hilton right now. You just can't do it. Really, because again, there's no real supporting cast outside of Doyle. There's no supporting cast around him. It is, but it's a bunch of scrubs, and he's being really asked to do a lot in Andrew Luck's absence. So I don't see how you can play him right now. I was just stunned by the projection numbers on T.Y. Hilton. Giants at Eagles. I like a lot of Eagles in this game. Okay, maybe not a lot, but this game might not be a pretty one either. Especially from a Giants perspective, because, oh my gosh, right now, we have a live look at the Giants offense, and it's a picture of a dumpster fire. I mean, that's how bad it's gotten. And Coach Ben McAdoo, who actually also calls the plays, either also came out this week and said, we're going to change some things. And if I have to give up play calling, that's something we're going to have to look at. Well, obviously, because this offense is just absolute crap. I mean, literally, it's crap. I mean, they're getting booed off the field in MetLife Stadium at halftime Monday Night Football against the Lions because they're just so gosh awful. The only player that really has any consistent fantasy value right now is Odell Beckham. He's really the only Giant you can play. The running game is a slime bucket. Evan Ingram, yes, at tight end, he is getting some. He found the end zone last week, got a touchdown, but you don't know if that's going to be fluky or consistent. It's just an absolute crapshoot. And Eli Manning is just not being very good. So clearly, right now, this is a disaster. Now for the Eagles are actually looking pretty functional. Carson Wentz is developing, a nice rapport with his receiving core. Alshon Jeffrey right now, as I mentioned last week, is a star of this. I'm still not a fan of Torrey Smith or Nelson Aguilar yet. But he's developing a nice rapport with this group, and at least this team, and again, this team is also kind of winning games with its defense in some ways because the defense has always been a strong point of Philadelphia, aside from the Chip Kelly years. But aside from that, they've actually been quite good. So this game to me is going to feel very one-sided. I feel like the Eagles are really going to be in control of this game. So again, I mentioned Odell Beckham is the only Giant you can trust. I mean, at this point, until the offense finds some semblance of production or consistent production from anyone else, Odell Beckham's the only Giant you can trust. For the Eagles, Alshon Jeffrey, yes, must start at this point. Set it, forget it. He's clearly emerged as the preferred target. You play him when he's healthy, and he has been. He's a set it, forget it. Zach Ertz, a tight end, yes, is also getting involved a lot in this offense. And again, if you lost a tight end, you can use him. The only downside about Zach Ertz, he doesn't find the end zone very often. He's not really touchdown heavy, but he does get enough targets to be valuable in this offense. Maybe more in PPR leagues you play Zach Ertz, but still a good option. And again, I mentioned the Eagles' defense. You got to play him in this game. You have to. It's obvious. You have to play him with the way the Giants' offense is. But the sits, though, there's really no one else to know to start in this game. I'm going to say, though, you sit Carson Wentz because, again, even though the Giants' offense has not been great, the defense has been very, very, tough, especially with the secondary. The Giants' secondary is actually a very decent unit. Wentz has been more than respectable, but he's facing a very tough secondary. Eli Apple, Landon Collins, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie on the other side. Janoris Jenkins did not play last week. We'll see if he can come back this week. But still a very respectable, very tough secondary. The QB2 upside is there with Wentz, but there is some risk involved in playing Carson Wentz. Again, I mentioned all Giants skill players not named Odell Beckham. Dumpster fire. It's right up there with the Bengals, the Colts, and the Jets. I mean, it's that bad. It's one of the worst in the league, if not the worst. Avoid. But as bad as the Giants running backs are, which is a slime bucket, the Eagles running backs are really not that much better. They're a slime bucket as well. LeGarrette Blount, while yes, he is the number one back, he's become a major disappointment. He really hasn't, been the kind of, back he was in New England. He hasn't, been the runner they expected, so he's been a disappointment. And Darren Sproles, while he gets a lot of work, he's not consistent enough to really warrant strong fantasy value. So I don't like him either. Carson Wentz will be forced to throw in this matchup, and I just feel like that's another one to avoid. And again, I mentioned Torrey Smith and Nelson Aguilar. Jeffrey's the star of this group. I wouldn't touch either one right now. Clearly a mess. Dolphins at the Jets. We got to start them all alert. Start your Dolphins. I mean, come on now. We know how bad the Jets are. I mean, it's pretty obvious. They are really, really, really bad. And the Dolphins actually last week, even though they barely beat the Chargers 19-17, Jay Cutler looks functional. I mean, it looks like, I'm sorry, Dave from Chicago, but I don't think we can say that he sucks anymore, at least not in this offense, because Jay Cutler works well with Adam Gase. It's obvious. It's clear that with the talent that Miami has in the offense, with the Jai in the backfield, with Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker, and now Kenny Stills getting involved, finally. I mean, Jay Cutler has weapons, solid weapons to throw to, and he's making the most of it. So, in this matchup, this is a plus all the way around. So, you got to go with your Dolphins in this game. I mean, for the Jets, there are no obvious starts. There really isn't. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever done this in FFSR history, but there is no Jet I can really recommend. None. There isn't. I'm sorry. There really isn't. It's just too risky. Too risky across the board. Dolphins are starting Jai at running back. Jarvis Landry at wide receiver, Devontae Parker at wide receiver, and the Dolphins defense. If you need a streaming DST this week, pick up the Dolphins on waivers. They are probably the most popular streaming defense option this week because of the great matchup. Pick up the Dolphins if you also need help at DST and play them this week as well. But for the Jets, like I said, none. But I'm also going to recommend you start Jay Cutler. Never thought I'd see this day. But against the Jets, any quarterback should be able to put up a respectable fantasy day in this game. Cutler thrives in this offense clearly, and he has serious high-end QB2 appeal with QB1 upside in this plus matchup. If you're in a pinch at quarterback, you need somebody in a pinch or a two-quarterback league, pick up Jay Cutler. You will reap the rewards. And Kenny Stills, as again I mentioned, normally the third wheel in this offense doesn't get a whole lot, but in this plus matchup, you could do worse as a wide receiver 3. I think he's serviceable, and I think you can play him here. But again, you're sitting Jet skill players. You're sitting them. No Jet is worth owning or playing in fantasy football right now, period, end of statement. Quarterbacks, we know, suck. Bilal Powell has busted out and clearly lost his job to Matt Forte, who's really just a risky flex option at best. Robbie Anderson, where's he? Has not emerged as the number one wide receiver at all. Now, Jermaine Kearse, I will say, has broken out in the past couple games, but if anything, he's a risky 3 or 4 too, because how do we know he's going to do that on a consistent basis? We don't know. That's just it. So outside of Kearse, if you're desperate, I really can't recommend any other Jets. That's the long and short of it. I really can't recommend anyone else. Boy, my phone is blowing up. Oh. Yeah, my phone is blowing up because, at least from a Twitter perspective, because I saw a commercial on NFL Network earlier today. It was for Madden 18 on NFL Network, and it had a guy apparently had a lot of the Rams people over, and he took the Rams to Super Bowl and won. And there's this one picture, and I love it, or one image of Rampage, the Rams mascot, and he's just laying on the couch like this. And just like this, and just in the sleep position. And I'm like, do I even need to ask what happened to your Rampage? So I took a picture of it and I posted it to Twitter. And now it's blowing up, getting liked and retweeted. And Rampage actually tweeted back at me and said, probably not. You probably don't want to know what happened. So that's why my phone's getting blown up. But yeah, Dolphins, Jets. Start your Dolphins. The only Jet, if you want to take a risk, is Jermaine Kearse, but only if you're really, really hurting at wide receiver or need depth. Broncos at the Bills. How about the Broncos? Oh, my gosh. I mean, where the heck did Trevor Siemian come from? I mean, wow. I mean, they just absolutely blew the doors off of Dallas last week. I mean, that was totally and literally unexpected. 42-17. I mean, yes, the Broncos defense we know is strong, but Trevor Siemian threw for 4 touchdowns last week. Oh my gosh, just absolutely outstanding. Clearly he now has emerged as a very viable fantasy quarterback and someone that clearly has control of this. I think we've all forgotten about the quarterback battle he was in with Paxton Lynch. Clearly that's forgotten because he now controls this offense, clearly. And the Broncos D shut down the Cowboys totally, shut down Ezekiel Elliott totally, and talk of that whole game was how Zeke gave up on 2 plays. So that's the story. I mean, my goodness, the Broncos are back. I mean, clearly, I don't know if they really went away, but they are clearly back. And they might be here to stay because with Siemian playing so well, with C.J. Anderson in the backfield, with the weapons they have at wide receiver, and that defense, the Broncos are solidly balanced. And the AFC West now, you realize now you've got Denver, Kansas City, and Oakland, 3 strong teams, all at 2-0, and you got the Chargers sitting there at 0-2. But those 3 teams are going to make for a very fun race in the AFC West. So, but now they got a challenge to shut down Buffalo, but really that's not going to be too much of a challenge because really Buffalo only has 2 weapons. Tyrod Taylor running at quarterback with his running ability and LaShawn McCoy. That's pretty much it. Maybe occasionally Charles Clay at tight end gets looks in the red zone. Brett Yard, the Bills are going to get to the red zone in this game because of that Denver defense. So very, very risky for a lot of the Bills this week. But for the Broncos, your obvious plays, C.J. Anderson at running back, the 2 wide receivers, Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, yes, you play them, and that Broncos defense. Those 4 are set it, forget it, obvious plays. For the Bills, LaShawn McCoy, is still a good play. It's hard for you to sit him. I know this matchup, because after seeing what Denver did to Ezekiel Elliott, I know you're kind of worried about LaShawn McCoy this week, and I get it. But, you really, unless you have better options, you probably can't afford to sit LaShawn McCoy this week. So while he may not produce the big numbers that you would normally expect from LaShawn McCoy on a regular basis, there really isn't anyone else for Buffalo to turn to outside of Mike Tolbert at the goal line. But that's his role. He's the goal line, third down, passing back. So, you might not get the big numbers, but you really can't afford to sit LaShawn McCoy unless you really have solid depth at running back. And then I mentioned Charles Clay at tight end. He's been a reliable workhorse at tight end, getting a lot of targets from Tyrod Taylor, again, especially in the red zone. He's found the end zone once this season. So he's getting a lot of work there. I think you can afford to play him as well. But again, I mentioned Trevor Siemian. A performance that definitely came out of left field. And actually, you want to win a bar bet? You'll win a lot of bar bets with this one. Leading the NFL in touchdown passes for 2 weeks. No, not that one either. No, it's not Brady. It's not Rodgers. It's not Breeze. Not any of those guys. No, it's Trevor Siemian. Leads the NFL in touchdown passes for 2 weeks. I don't think anyone could have guessed that. As long as he is firing on all cylinders in this offense, there's no sign to think he's not going to be. He's a strong QB2, but certainly with QB1 upside. The Bills' secondary really is nothing special. So risky there. The sits, Tyrod Taylor, I think you have to sit him in this game after what the Broncos secondary just did to Dak and shutting down the Cowboys offense. I don't think you really start a quarterback really against them of any kind until further notice or until we really see a quarterback really figure out this Broncos defense because it's just so good with the pass rush with Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware. And then that secondary is just so scary. So you can't do it. And besides, Buffalo's receiving core is a slime bucket on its own because, you know, Jordan Matthews and Zay Jones have been nothing but disappointments for their, you know, for anybody. You know, I bet the Bills really miss Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods right now because these two guys, Jordan Matthews, Zay Jones, have been major, major disappointments, and they cannot be trusted right now for fantasy purposes. Saints at the Panthers, another battle here of 2-0 against 0-2. It could be real danger zone for the Saints if they lose this game. But again, here's the thing, though. Traditionally, as we have seen, the Saints are a different team outdoors than they are away from the Superdome. Now, granted, they played New England in the Superdome last week, and yes, they still lost, but they looked a lot better there than they do on the road. So now you got to play in Carolina, tough environment. Cam Newton, fired up. Did lose a great targeting Greg Olsen, but just had my head for some reason. Great. Just lost a targeting Greg Olsen, but you get the fact that he's got other weapons there with McCaffrey in the backfield, with Kelvin Benjamin. Devin Funchess now is going to get more involved because of Olsen being out. So. Granted, plus you've got Newton's running ability, so the weapons are still there for Carolina, and the Panthers' defense right now is the top unit in the NFL because they've only given up 6 points. That is unfathomable. The Panthers' defense has only given up 6 points through 2 weeks. 3 against the 49ers, 3 against Buffalo last week. That is absolutely amazing. So the Panthers, the Saints probably – it would shock me if the Saints were held to 3 points this week. But then again, with them being outdoors, that's definitely a concern. But, I think you can still play at least a couple Saints this week. And that's really the wide receivers. Those right now are your safest bets for the Saints, at least in this game. Talking about Michael Thomas and Ted Ginn. And Ted Ginn more so in PPR leagues, but again, Willie Snead hasn't returned yet. I believe his suspension ends this week, and then he'll be eligible to play in week 4. So, again, you take advantage while Willie Snead is out. You play Michael Thomas because he did get at least a lot of the targets. Then Ted Ginn, playing against his former team, those deep shots I'm sure will come. And I think in PPR leagues he's a lot more valuable. So you can play those too. You're going to play a lot of the Panthers in this game. We're going to play a lot of them because of the fact the Saints' defense, as we know, especially the secondary, is very bad. New England just carved them up like crazy last week, and the opportunity is going to be there with talent there. So Cam Newton, both running backs I like in this game. Jonathan Stewart, Christian McCaffrey, especially again in PPR with his dual threat ability. Excuse me. I think you can play both guys. Kelvin Benjamin, obviously, you play him as a set and forget it. And again, that Panthers defense has been so strong. I think you can still play him in this game because, again, New Orleans, as we know, different team outdoors. But again, I mentioned Devin Funchess because, again, with Greg Olsen out multiple weeks, Funchess is going to benefit the most from that absence. And if you're in a pinch, I think he's a solid wide receiver 3 option for you. But the sits are mostly Saints. The only Panther I'll mention as a sit is Ed Dickson. Ed Dickson has had some nice moments in the NFL, but he's really not a great replacement for Olsen at tight end. He's not really great for fantasy purposes for that regard. Here are even some better options in my waiver wire. I got Jason Witten off waivers. Witten has touchdowns back-to-back weeks. I picked him up off waivers. Charles Clay was on my waiver wire. Jesse James from Pittsburgh was on my waiver wire. Jared Cook of Oakland. Ben Watson in Baltimore, and Jack Doyle in Indy, who I've mentioned. So those guys were even available on the wire in my league, and I still think they're better options than Ed Dickson. So I would not play Ed Dickson. I would not pick him up. I'd leave him either, you can scout him maybe, but leave him on waivers. Don't play Ed Dickson yet until we really see he establishes himself in this offense. But the rest of the sits, so I can get this out, the rest of the sits are Saints. Drew Brees, it's kind of become the norm. You don't start Drew Brees when he's outdoors, and especially not against the Panthers defense. Like I said, has only given up those 6 points in the first 2 games. You just don't do it. Very, very risky. More of a QB2 at best, but a very risky play. The Saints running backs are slime bucket city. Avoid, avoid, avoid. Don't do it. I mean, again, we don't know out of this group who's going to be, if anyone you want to play, if you're in a pinch, Alvin Kamara might be a flex, but you don't play Adrian Peterson. Mark Ingram, no, too inconsistent right now. He seems to be the back that's getting the most work. So, but still a risky play because you don't know that, they're just all used at different times. So, kind of like Arizona. So, no. And I'm going to say sit Coby Fleener in this game and give him the same reasons to sit Drew Brees. Different player at home than on the road. So, I don't like Coby Fleener in this game. Steelers at the Bears. Again, this is 2-0 against 0-2. You're going to play a lot of your Steelers in this game. And the big story, though, from a Chicago perspective, two big stories. One is Jordan Howard going to play with a shoulder issue. And if he doesn't, Tariq Cohen is going to get a lot more work, so he's obviously then a must play. But also, when will it be time for the Bears to say, you know what, you tried the Mike Glennon experiment, it's not working, we need to play Mitchell Trubisky? When is that time going to come? I've seen a lot of Bears fans already posting that they want to play Mitchell Trubisky, and that's understandable. And that time might come this week if Glennon struggles again. So clearly, I think Mike Glennon is on a very short leash, a very short fuse, because he has struggled so much in these first couple games. So it might be that time. But I think John Fox even said that he's not going to change yet, which again is kind of crazy unless the Bears just want to struggle and tank. But really, you haven't given Mike Glennon all that much because, again, you've already lost the top 2 receivers this season with Cameron Meredith and Kevin White, and, you don't have much left. So, you're going to start a lot of your Steelers in this game. That's really the big things to note in this game. Obvious starts, Ben Roethlisberger, yes. Le'Veon Bell, you betcha. Antonio Brown, yep. Martavis Bryant, and again, especially more so in PPR leagues, but yes, you start Martavis Bryant as well. I'm also going to say Jesse James if he plays. Obviously, the ankle is a concern, but as long as he plays, he's starting to get a lot more targets here at tight end. I know I made one comment at one point that we didn't look like Heath Miller. Well, he's starting to look more like it. He's getting more targets now. He's getting more work. So he has also arisen from whatever ashes he was in, and now he's getting more work. So I think you can play him. And the Steelers' defense, you got to play him in this matchup. With what little the Bears have, you got to play them here. The only Bear to start is Tariq Cohen at this point. I mean, he's really the only one worth starting. Again, with Jordan Howard's status being unknown. Now, if Howard plays, then I think you still got to play him as at least an RB2. But again, if he's limited, he's more of a flex. But as long as he plays, you play him. But Tariq Cohen, regardless, is a start because, again, the PPR work that he gets, and if Howard's out, then he gets even more of a workload. So I think you got to play him and still utilize him in the offense. But the sits, Mike Glennon, I shouldn't have to tell you this, but when fans are already calling for Trubisky, you don't trust Mike Glennon in fantasy. That's obvious. It's bad enough that the receiving core is decimated. You're definitely not playing him against the Steelers either, even at home. Jordan Howard, status in doubt with that shoulder injury. If he plays, though, you play him as normal, but a risky RB2 given the matchup. And the Bears wide receivers, not in this matchup and not with the group as thin as it is. And not, again, we haven't really had someone emerge yet out of the group. Falcons at the Lions. This, to me, is the fantasy jackpot cha-ching of the week because this is the only 2-0 versus 2-0 matchup. This one could have the potential to be very much a shootout because we all know that both these quarterbacks like to throw a lot. Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, they both, love to throw their weapons and utilize them. So, and, even though Atlanta actually has a running game. Detroit really doesn't, but Atlanta at least has some semblance of running games. So they're going to mix that up and utilize that too. But this game just has the makings of a real shootout here. So I like a lot of the players in this game. There's still a few that I don't, but there's really a lot that I like. For the Falcons, I have 6 guys listed as obvious starts. I mean, that's how confident I am in these guys to have big weeks. You know the first 4. Matt Ryan, Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman, more so in PPR leagues, but again, serviceable, and Julio Jones. Those 4, set it, forget it, automatic. You know this. So they need to be played. Mohamed Sanu, I'm going to say Mohamed Sanu, more so again in PPR leagues, but Mohamed Sanu is starting to become very valuable as a number 2 wide receiver in this offense. So I really, really like him, and I think he could potentially have a very good week this week as well. And Austin Hooper. I mean, they're utilizing him as a tight end. Had the big week 1, and they're using him in this offense. So I think you got to keep playing him as long as he continues to do well. For the Lions, again, Matthew Stafford does well at home. Has done well for the first weeks of the season. Get another big week this week. Golden Tate will bounce back. I'm a Golden Tate owner. Yes, against the Giants, not a great performance. But here's the thing: the Lions really didn't have to do much to beat the Giants. They didn't have to use all the guys that they had as much. So plus again, that Giants secondary, very, very tough. So I'm not worried about Golden Tate. I have a feeling he'll bounce back big in this matchup. I'm starting him this week, and I think he's going to have a great week. Marvin Jones is finding the end zone on a more consistent basis. I think, again, in PPR leagues, he's more valuable, but he's still at least a serviceable wide receiver 3 with 2 value. So I think he's still playable. And Eric Ebron found the end zone last week. So Eric Ebron is back to full health and very much one of the more successful tight ends in the NFL. So clearly he is a strong option as well. Other than that, though, there's really no one else of note to start. That's a lot of your skill players right there. And I think you can start most of those guys. But really the sits, the Lions running backs. This group has been added to the slime bucket list. I mean, I'm sorry, but they have. I mean, joining Cincinnati, New Orleans, the Giants, there's a lot. The Jets. I mean, there's a lot of slime bucket running backs out there now. Arizona. We're just going to keep adding to the list. But now they're at it. Amir Abdullah, while he has the occasional breakout run, he's not consistent enough. He's a bust and a half. Theo Riddick really isn't used enough to warrant strong, PPR value. He's got some, but he's more like a risky flex play at this point. He didn't have enough consistency to warrant great value. And Dwayne Washington. He was occasionally used a couple of times. So you might what happened to Zach Zenner? Is he hurt? I mean, I haven't seen him on a third down or goal line situation either. So I was curious to see Dwayne Washington last week. So avoid this. Avoid it. No, don't touch it. And Kenny Galladay, Kenny Galladay was picked up in my league after his big week 1 game and then dropped right after. That tells you anything. So much for that week 1 excitement with Kenny Galladay. Complete disappeared against the Giants, but again, that was more or less was game flow and the Giants secondary. That was just kind of a thing. Most of the line receivers disappeared that week. So, but until we see more consistent play, Galladay is only really a very risky wide receiver 3 or 4 because again, we don't know what we're going to get out of that. We don't know who Stafford's mainly. Really Tate is safe. Jones is pretty safe. Galladay being that number 3 is just kind of a hit or miss. So we'll see what we get from him. Bucks at the Vikings. The big question in this game: will Sam Bradford play this week? Was a shocking inactive last week and we heard it was a knee injury. We didn't know the extent of it at first. Then we later found out bone bruise on his knee. So clearly there's something to that, and it clearly wasn't good enough for him to play in week 2. And predictably, with Case Keenum at quarterback, the offense did not look as smooth, and they got their doors blown off by the Steelers. So it's a big question mark coming into this week. From a fantasy perspective, if If Sam Bradford is active, if he plays, then yeah, you play a lot of your normal Vikings receivers that you would normally play. But if he doesn't, then clearly it's a major downgrade. And maybe outside of Stephon Diggs, I really wouldn't recommend anybody else from the receiving core. And then that helps Dalvin Cook, because then I think he's going to get more of a workload, because I don't think the Vikings want Case Keenum to throw all that much, if at all. So yeah, this game, it really hinges on if Sam Bradford is active or not. But for the Bucs, the two running backs I think I still like in this game, Jacquizz Rodgers and Charles Sims, more so again in PPR, but I think you continue to thrive off these guys. Again, with Doug Martin out till week 5, you keep playing these guys, especially because, again, the Vikings secondary is also very, very strong. So I think Jameis Winston is going to struggle a little bit. So I think the Bucs are going to lean on the ground game a little bit more this week. But with that being said, also, you can't afford to sit Mike Evans. And I know Xavier Rhodes is probably going to be on him like crazy. But Mike Evans is just too talented, and I think he's still going to find some ways to outshine Xavier Rhodes and still make big plays against him. So you can't afford to sit Mike Evans. Yes, the Vikings have done a good job this season against number 1 wide receivers, but Mike Evans is just too talented to sit. So you can't do it. I got to keep riding with him. You got to keep going with Mike Evans. For the Vikings, again, I think the only for sure automatic 3 are Dalvin Cook at running back, Stephon Diggs. Even if Bradford is out, I think you can still play Stephon Diggs because he's still going to be frequently targeted. So you can't shy away from Stephon Diggs. So I think you can play him, and of course that Vikings defense, which I think is going to really hassle Jameis Winston when he has to throw and put him in some tough situations. So you can still play the Vikings D. But the 3 that are kind of up in the air, you play these guys as long as obviously Bradford, if he's active, you play him. But also Adam Thielen is a good play, especially in PPR leagues, but again, only if Bradford is active. Thielen didn't do much when Keenum was under center, so I worry about that. And the same goes for Kyle Rudolph in the red zone. Bradford loves throwing to him in the red zone, but the Vikings didn't get a chance, so that limited Rudolph's opportunity. So if Bradford is active, you play Kyle Rudolph. If not, then I think you look elsewhere and you keep Kyle Rudolph benched, because just not a good matchup there. Not a good thing to do if Bradford sits. There's no real other starts of note. For the sits, though, again, I mentioned Jameis Winston. I feel like you have to sit him in this game. Look, the Vikings, outside the Broncos, have one of the better secondaries in the NFL. It's pretty obvious. Normally, Winston is a great play, but tough matchup on the road, very risky low-end QB2. I would look elsewhere this week. Case Keenum, this only applies, though, again, if Bradford is out again. But you're not playing Case Keenum, obviously, because he's not very good. Let's just be blunt about this. Case Keenum is not very good. So, and all the skill players will get a major downgrade if Keenum plays. I'd sit Thielen. I'd sit Rudolph. Diggs would be more wide receiver 3 play if Keenum plays, but I'd still keep Stephon Diggs active in your lineup as a result. Deshaun Jackson, until we see more of him in this offense, I can't really recommend him as anything more, again, than a risky wide receiver 3 or 4. I want to see him break out at some point, but until we really see more of him, I can't really recommend him as a strong play just yet. Plus, the matchup's tough anyway. Could be double team, maybe not. It could give Evans opportunities to shine, or if Evans then is double team, maybe it opens up for Jackson a little bit. I don't know, but still kind of a risk. So I wouldn't really fully rely on Deshaun Jackson yet. And again, I mentioned the Bucs tight ends. Can't trust either of them until one really emerges, whether it's Cameron Brate or O.J. Howard. Until one emerges, I wouldn't trust either guy. Texans at Patriots. They're back. Were we ever really worried, though, about New England? Honestly, the Kansas City game, look, Kansas City just came to play that night. Really, I think everyone expected the Patriots to bounce back in a big way against the Saints, and they did that. And so there really wasn't a big, brouhaha, and now they get a Texans team that they traditionally have dominated anyway at home. Yeah, you're going up against a rookie quarterback, Deshaun Watson. Granted, had pretty much the winning touchdown run against Cincinnati, that wild 49-yard touchdown run against Cincinnati. Again, if you haven't seen it, YouTube it. It's pretty darn impressive. But this game, though, I feel like it's going to be – the Texans' defense is nice, but, man, I mean, it's just – I don't know. The Patriots, to me, are going to take full advantage of this game, especially, again, being at home and the Texans being very hit or miss on offense. The Texans have only scored 22 points this season. That's 11 a game. Even though the Patriots' defense has not been great this year, I don't feel like the Texans are going to have enough firepower to keep up offensively. So I think this game is going to go, I like a lot of Patriots in this game. I only really like two Texans. That's Lamar Miller at running back and DeAndre Hopkins at wide receiver. I mean, those two guys are sure things, set it, forget it. You really can't afford to say either one. You play them, obviously. With the Patriots, Tom Brady, Mike Gillislee at running back, clearly is getting the most work, clearly the most touches at the goal line. You play him. Brandon Cooks, don't give up on him yet. Yes, he has struggled with the first couple weeks, but I feel like at some point he's going to have to break out. You keep rolling with him. Chris Hogan, if he plays, there was a bit of a knee concern in the last game, but he had a touchdown last week. If he plays, he's still a solid start, so you keep rolling with him. And, of course, Gronk, as long as he plays, if the groin is not an issue. But, again, Gronk didn't practice today, so monitor that. But, if as long as he plays, then you play Rob Gronkowski. Again, no other starts of note, though. You can't, as great as Watson's 49-yard touchdown was last week, I don't think he's going to do that against Bill Belichick. I really don't see that happening. Watson's not going to have that kind of game again this week against New England. So, remember, Belichick always finds a way to shut down the team's best weapon. It could be DeAndre Hopkins he focuses on, or it could be Watson, or both. So, I wouldn't trust Deshaun Watson yet. I'd sit him. Not even a recommended two-quarterback league play at this point, again, until we see more consistency from Deshaun Watson. And again, all the other Patriots running backs, it's a mega-size bucket. I mean, this is we talk about the little slime buckets. This is a mega-size slime bucket because, and it doesn't help now that Rex Burkhead with that rib issue is banged up. So, James White and Deion Lewis don't do enough to warrant consideration. Gillislee has emerged the clear winner in this. You avoid the rest of this backfield. All right, moving on now to the afternoon games. Seahawks at the Titans. This is, again, another interesting battle here. Two teams that are really, this season at least looking pretty solid. Tennessee looked really impressive last week against Jacksonville in that big win. Seattle, is always very good. So this could be a very entertaining game. Again, you got two, dual threat quarterbacks here with Russell Wilson and Marcus Mariota. The big question mark in this game, of course, from a Tennessee perspective is the statuses of DeMarco Murray and Corey Davis. Of course, Murray with the hamstring issue. Derrick Henry, though, looked really good in his place last week. So if Murray is out, then Derrick Henry can be someone that you pick up, put in as an RB2 right away, and even in a tough matchup, I think we'll get a lot of work because, again, you don't want to throw on Seattle too much because Seattle's secondary is really, really good. So I think, for that reason, you monitor DeMarco Murray, obviously, but if he doesn't play, then Derrick Henry comes in and becomes the guy. So the obvious starts here for the Seahawks, Russell Wilson, yes. Obviously, he's pretty much matchup proof. You play him here, even though the Titans' defense has looked better at times this year and improved. I think you still play him, even though he doesn't do as well away from home. I think you still play Russell Wilson. Doug Baldwin, number one receiver. Yep, you play him, and you play the Seahawks defense in this matchup as well. Because again, while the Titans are improved, Mariota might not have all his weapons. Again, that secondary being strong. You play the Seahawks defense in this game. The only Titan I can really recommend, really obviously in this game, is Derrick Henry, as long as DeMarco Murray is out. Now, that with the hamstring, though, again, those soft tissue injuries for running backs tend to linger. So even if DeMarco Murray plays, I feel he's going to be extremely limited. So I think Derrick Henry is still going to get a lot of work. Even in PPR leagues, he can be valuable. So Derrick Henry, to me, is a solid RB2 in standard this week, even a 2 or 3 in PPR as well, and a nice flex play because I think he's still going to get a ton of work whether or not Murray is active or not. But we have a starting running back in Seattle. It emerged from the slime bucket. It finally happened. It finally happened. We have a legitimate running back coming out of Seattle. Chris Carson has emerged as the guy. We were going through. Is it Thomas Rawls? Is it Eddie Lacy? C.J. Procise? No. Chris Carson has emerged now as the back to own in the Seattle backfield. It's clearly now his job to lose. He has dominated the first 2 weeks. He is now a serviceable RB2 with upside. If you are in a pinch at running back, if by some crazy chance Chris Carson is still available in your league, get him now. Don't wait. I mean, because he's now the guy to own. He's clearly his backfield to lose because we don't know what the roles there is going to be. Thomas Rawls' health is an issue. Eddie Lacy was a healthy scratch last week. If that tells you anything about how they feel about him. And C.J. Procise, well, his third down back, he's not consistent enough. So clearly Carson is the back to own in Seattle. So I think you play him in this game. The sits, though, I'm going to recommend you sit Marcus Mariota. Normally is a pretty good play, but this matchup just is not to his liking. It's basically become a built-in rule. If you're facing the Legion of Boom, you don't start that quarterback in fantasy, period. Because his running ability, he still has at least some value, but a very risky QB2 or 3. Very, very risky play this week. I mentioned DeMarco Murray, questionable with that hamstring injury. If he plays, still a very, risky QB2 given the matchup, but I think more of a 3 because of that, they might be limited with that injury. Again, all the other Seahawks running backs, you sit. Eddie Lacy is benched. Thomas Rawls is oft injured or still is. I don't even know what Procise's role really is anymore besides being the inconsistent third down back. So we have a winner. That group can sit in their slime bucket. And really the Titans wide receivers, though, and Delaney Walker, again, not against the Legion of Boom. You're not going to do it. I mean, yes, Rashard Matthews now. If Corey Davis doesn't play because of his hamstring issue, then maybe Rashard Matthews steps up and has to become the guy. But, again, the secondary is going to be locked down on these guys, and so I just don't trust the matchup this week. And Tyler Lockett, I mentioned him again, but only because until we see that breakout performance from them, he's not really even a serviceable wide receiver 3. Paul Richardson seems to be getting more targets, more work, and he might be a 3 or a flex play. But Lockett really is not really worth a play until we really see him fully back, fully recovered from the leg issue. So just not recommended. Bengals at Packers. Start your Packers. I mean, let's be honest here. The Bengals just fired their offensive coordinator, who was there for 15 years. But when your team can't even find the end zone in the first 2 weeks of the season, in the first 8 quarters, 0 touchdowns and nine total points on 3 field goals, that's a problem. Clearly, this Bengals offense is just as much a dumpster fire as the Giants, Colts, and Jets. I mean, it is really, really bad, and it's not going to get any better in this matchup going on the road to Green Bay against a very good defensive unit and a very good offensive team, which the Bengals are not right now. So but there's a little bit of uncertainty facing the Packers because, again, as I mentioned in the intro with the injury situation, the status of Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. Now, Jordy Nelson did practice today, dealing with that quad injury, but he did practice. So that's an encouraging sign. Again, monitor that on the days to come on the injury report, see what happens with Jordy Nelson. But Randall Cobb did not practice today. Now, I really probably wouldn't recommend Randall Cobb anyway. To me, he's too inconsistent for my liking anyway. But, you know, he's very much a risky wide receiver 4 anyway. So, to me, he's not a great play anyway. But, you know, the shoulder issue, so that might open up an opportunity for someone like Geronimo Allison. Yeah, who? Yeah, Geronimo Allison. So, you know, he's the guy that you would fill in if one or the other or both miss the game. The obvious starts here for the Bengals. The only Bengal you can trust is A.J. Green. I mean, really, that's – and he even interesting, and I applaud A.J. Green for this. He even spoke out and said how frustrating it's been with this offense, you know, whether it's, you know, being, you know, Andy Dalton not being accurate, or, you know, not making smart play calls, or the offense being bad as a whole. When A.J. Green speaks, apparently the team ownership listened, because then they made the move to fire their offensive coordinator and replace him. So clearly he has a lot of weight on things, and he's a star receiver. So, you know, he has a lot of sway, obviously. So he's still trustworthy. I think he's still going to get plenty of targets, you know, especially if this game gets ugly. Then he's going to get a lot of work. So A.J. Green will be fine. You really can't afford to sit him. You still play A.J. Green. For the Packers, you know the obvious guys at this point. Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, yes. Ty Montgomery at running back. Devontae Adams, wide receiver, yes. Especially if one or two are out, he's going to get more work if Nelson or Cobb are out. Martellus Bennett at tight end, yep. You know, he's being involved there. You play him. And in this plus matchup, you play the Packers defense, obviously. But again, I mentioned Geronimo Allison. You know, if one or the other or both, Nelson or Cobb, miss this game, Allison could step in and get really, really, you know, go from nobody to someone with quick fantasy value very, very quick, and becomes the next in line. And if you're in a pinch, becomes a very serviceable wide receiver 3. Sit Andy Dalton. I mean, isn't that obvious? I mean, and I feel for him because he's a TCU grad, but for gosh sakes, Andy Dalton looks nothing like the Andy Dalton we usually see and know. I mean, he looks nothing like him. He's off target. He's throwing over receivers' heads. I mean, it was just really bad watching him play Houston on Thursday night, because he just looked so off his game. Until this offense actually scored a touchdown or really finds a pulse at all, you cannot trust him in fantasy, period. You just can't do it. Bengals running backs. Nope, they just can't pick one, can they? Nope, they can't do it. Slime Bucket City with Mixon, Hill, and Bernard. Avoid. And again, I mentioned Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. You know, both are banged up. And even if they play, I think they're both going to be limited. You know, if active, Nelson, I think you still play him, but a very risky, you know, again, wide receiver 2 or 3, because, again, the leg injuries, they can linger. So very, very risky play, might limit him. But I wouldn't even trust Cobb if he played or not, because, again, to me, Randall Cobb is more of a wide receiver 4 play. Very, very risky. Chiefs at the Chargers. Start your Chiefs. I mean, what else is there to say? The Chiefs are really good. Chargers, not so much. And the Chargers have the weapons. There's some good players there. You got Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen. They're your obvious two. That's it. That's really it. That's it for the Chargers. Is Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen. That's it. Now you say, wait a minute, Chris, what about Phillip Rivers? Do you really trust Phillip Rivers against this Chiefs secondary? I don't. And traditionally, the Chiefs have had the Chargers number. I mean, really, at least in the last couple games that I've seen, the Chiefs usually beat the Chargers, and they make Phillip Rivers' day pretty freaking miserable. And that's even with Eric Berry out. So I do not trust Phillip Rivers in this game. I think, you know, the only Chargers I would trust are Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen. The obvious for the Chiefs at this point, they're a triple threat. You know, you talk about the killer bees in Pittsburgh with Ben, Bell, and Brown. What do we call this unit in Kansas City? With Alex Smith, Kareem Hunt, and Tyreek Hill. SH squared? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a guess, but but you know, these three are set it and forget it. You know, Alex Smith, this is his offense, and he looks really good in it. Kareem Hunt has turned into a stud, replacing the injured Spencer Ware. He's going to keep firing on all cylinders. And Tyreek Hill is a stud at wide receiver. And Travis Kelce, again, one of the better tight ends in the NFL. He's a stud. And the Chiefs defense, even though I'm not starting them because I've had a better matchup on the wire for the Rams, if you're in a pinch, I think you can still play them in this game. But they're not going to put out, I think, big fantasy numbers. But I think they at least can still be in the double-digit category. So if there are better options out there for you to get, then yes, by all means, get a better one. But I think you can still play the Chiefs defense if you're in a pinch. There's no other starts of note. Sits. Again, I mentioned Phillip Rivers. He's done terrible against the Chiefs traditionally, and I don't like the matchup. His defense is still strong even without Barry. A risky QB2 play at best. The other Chargers wide receivers, aside from Keenan Allen, no. Not against this tough secondary. Plus, again, Tyrell Williams, Travis Benjamin still do inconsistent for my liking. And the Chargers tight ends, no. To me, you know, Hunter Henry, Antonio Gates, they're still invisible. And against the secondary, they'll be even more so if that's even possible. So, don't like it there either. Sunday night game. Raiders at Washington. I like a lot of the guys in this game. I'm going to recommend a lot of skill players here. This could potentially be fantasy jackpot number 2. Because really the only question mark in this game is the status of Rob Kelly at running back for Washington. Is the rib a big concern? You know, they found it wasn't fractured, but, you know, is it going to be enough of a concern that he won't play in this game? And then that opens up the opportunities for Chris Thompson and Samaje Perine to step up. So that's really a big thing this week. But I like a lot of the players in this game. For the Raiders, the 5 to me are obvious. Derek Carr, Marshawn Lynch at running back, Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper wide receiver, and Jared Cook, I think at tight end, is going to have a pretty big game. He's getting looks in the offense occasionally, but I think down the red zone, again, will be a big target. So, again, if you lost your tight end, I think Jared Cook is a very good pickup as well. And for Washington, the receiving core, Terrell Pryor, yes, Jamison Crowder, especially also in PPR leagues, I think is a solid play here as well. Because, again, I think Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw a lot in this game to keep up with the Raiders. So I feel like he's going to really get his receivers involved. I think they're going to have a good production. And Jordan Reed, as long as he plays, if the chest is not an issue, if he plays, then I think you keep Jordan Reed active in your lineups. But again, if Rob Kelly is out or limited with that rib injury, Chris Thompson is still a good pickup, even if Kelly is active, because he's getting more involved as well in the passing game. That's his kind of bread and butter. That's his thing. No pun intended. That's his forte. To the Jets back. He stands to be the most benefit if Kelly doesn't play. So, but he was still getting a lot of work. That's where he does his damage, is with the passing game. And really, when Kelly was out, Perine was a big disappointment. Now, granted, he is a rookie. He's a rookie at Oklahoma, so we don't expect much out of the box. But usually Thompson a PPR machine, but he may not get the bulk of the work this week. And again, I wanted him in my league and got outbeat for him. So RB3, though, but RB2 upside in standard leagues and a must-play now, though, in PPR leagues. The only person I'm going to recommend you sit is Kirk Cousins. And I know that could be tough on some of you, but here's the thing. The Raiders' pass rush, especially with Khalil Mack, is very intense. And I feel like they're going to really force Kirk Cousins into not only throwing, but making some bad decisions. And so I don't think he's going to have enough real opportunities to really keep up. He's going to have to in this game because I'm sure the Raiders are going to take full advantage of a porous Washington defense to give up a lot to Philly, and it's looked really bad this season. So to me, Cousins is more of a risky QB2, maybe more of a QB3 because of the fact that I don't think, he's going to have a lot of good opportunities in this game. He might, again, hit Pryor or Crowder every once in a while, but I don't think he's going to be consistent enough to warrant that strong fantasy value this week for you. And then the Monday night game, Cowboys at the Cardinals. How did the Cowboys follow that up? I mean, honestly, how did the Cowboys come off of that game against Denver? Well, I have a feeling they're going to come in really, really angry. I have a feeling they're going to, play angry. They don't want to be known as a team that got blown out 42-17 by Denver. And Zeke Elliott, the talk has been all about him, about his horrible game and his lack of effort on those 2 plays. That's been the talk all week. But I think that's probably going to be Dallas's worst game of the year. I don't really see them having a performance as bad as that, because that just shows you how good Denver really is. Excuse me. So I don't think Dallas is going to, stink that bad for the rest of the season, because the Cardinals secondary is strong, but they're not as strong as Denver. Don't get me wrong, Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu are great. They're great in that secondary. They're very, very good players. But they're not as elite as that Denver unit. So I think this could be a bounce back week for a lot of Cowboy players. And I still like a few of the Cardinals in this game. Obviously, the running back situation, you don't want to be involved. That's a slime bucket. I mean, that's a clear committee now. Full disclosure, apparently the Kerwin Williams hype was all fake. Apparently we all bought, and myself included, raised his hand, we all bought into the Kerwin Williams hype and thought he was going to be the guy. Well, we were wrong because he did little to nothing, and Chris Johnson got a lot of the work, and Ellington was still in on some downs. So clearly that's a committee mess in the wake of David Johnson being out. So we want to avoid that altogether. The Cowboys, though, obvious starts. You still play Zeke Elliott. Don't panic on Zeke. He's going to be fine. That's, like I said, that's probably going to be his worst game of the year, that Denver game. So don't panic on him. He will be fine. And Dez Bryant, I think, is still a great play, too. I'm not afraid. I'm sure Patrick Peterson is going to be on him, going to be locked down on Dez Bryant, but I'm not afraid of that. I think, Peterson even showed last week at times that he could be exploited. So, not great. So I'm still okay with, you really can't afford to sit Dez Bryant either. So you play him. And I mentioned Jason Witten. I picked him up off waivers because I lost Greg Olsen. Back-to-back touchdowns in the first 2 games of the season and getting targets in the offense. So Jason Witten looks like a very serviceable, at least low-end tight end 1 moving forward. For the Cardinals, the only 2 guys I can recommend right now as obvious plays are Carson Palmer, because the way he directs this offense is a really good job, and the Cowboys secondary isn't all that great. And Larry Fitzgerald, obviously, is an obvious must-play. But J.J. Nelson made me look like a genius last week. I mentioned with John Brown being injured again, I know, shocker, right? With that quad issue, someone had to step in his absence, and J.J. Nelson was the guy that did it, and he's now a very serviceable wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. You start him again if John Brown is out. As for the sits, though, I think you still have to sit Dak Prescott. I mean, yes, the Cardinals secondary, maybe not as tough as Denver, but still a stout unit. Normally Dak a great play, but bad matchup. I think you look elsewhere this week. Again, I mentioned the Cardinals running backs. It's a slime bucket. It's clearly a slime bucket now. Can't pick one, can he? Thanks for that waste, Bruce Arians. Thanks for that waste of a waiver pickup. Williams, Ellington, Johnson, mega slime bucket. Avoid, avoid, avoid. Again, John Brown, just turned mine, he's injured again. And then the other Cowboys wide receivers, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, really don't pull enough targets to be worth wide receiver 3 value, so I would not recommend either one of those guys, again, especially in this tough matchup. All right, that is it. That is it for week 3. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in, your views, your subscribers, your support. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Again, if you have any lineup dilemmas you're dealing with, again, if you got bit by the injury bug this week as I did, if you need waiver help, if you need anything, please feel free to leave a comment in the box below. Again, I will check leading up to the games, so I always get my alerts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I will try to help the best way that I can. for you to get a win this week. So, what's ahead for tomorrow? What are you going to, I'll be back here again tomorrow night for ATSD Episode 9, 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow, back here on the channel. What do you expect to see on ATSD? Well, I will give recaps of the last 3 MLP Season 7 episodes. That would be 17 through 19. So again, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear, either mute the volume during that part or don't watch. You can watch the last part after that, but just mute the volume. Recaps of those. We'll recap a little bit of football, my early thoughts, again, also on my high school team here in Logansport, Purdue football, Indiana State football, early thoughts on my college teams that I like. So I'll share those thoughts as well. A little battle I had with Windows. I will talk about a story about when I was stuck in Windows Update hell on last week. But then you'll want to stay till the end on tomorrow night, because that is when I will deliver my epic rant. My epic rant on the Colts. And let me tell you, I will have a lot to say. So tune in tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time for ATSD Episode 9, right here, back on the channel. But as for the FFSR, good luck this week. Go get a win in Week 3. Good luck to you again. Any questions, feel free to ask for your league, your team, your game, your home. Spikey Dash, signing off. Good night, and God bless, and continued prayers and thoughts go out to all those affected by the hurricanes, by whether it's Jose on the East Coast, Maria pounding to the Caribbean again, the same places that get hit by Irma. My thoughts with Puerto Rico. My thoughts with those affected in Mexico City by the major earthquake that happened there. Thoughts are with you guys as well. All affected by these devastating disasters. Thoughts and prayers from me to all of you. Stay strong. Stay tough. Eventually, the recovery, yes, will take a long time, even with my friends in the Florida Keys, but you will get through. Just stay strong through all this. So my prayers and thoughts are with all of you. Again, good night, God bless, and prayers to all affected. See you tomorrow, ATSD, Episode 9, 7 o'clock. Good night.